All right, good afternoon. Let's get started. Thank you all for joining us in person and virtually. This is a very special educational seminar for a number of reasons. One, it's June, it's Pride Month, and so with that theme, we're very excited to have a session on legal name changes in Illinois, but it's also a CLE and an educational seminar. There are pro bono volunteers and Pili advisors joining us, maybe some in person, mostly over Zoom, but we're excited to have everyone here. So I will just turn it over to Elizabeth Ricks and Toya Crow from the TransLegal Chicago House and Social Services to train us on legal name changes in Illinois. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm Elizabeth Ricks. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the legal director at the Trans Life Care Program at Chicago House and Social Service Agency. We're an HIV and AIDS org primarily, but within that we have a legal services program that's exclusively for trans and gender expansive people, regardless of HIV and AIDS status. And Toya, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Toya. I use they them pronouns and I'm the paralegal at the TransLegal program.
So what we're going to talk about today, first, I'm going to talk about like why name changes are relevant, why they're important, and then Toya will walk you through the process of how to do a legal name change in Illinois, and then we'll end by talking about the ins and outs of our current law and why it's problematic and policy work we're doing to try and change that. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end. I'm not great with technology, so please, I apologize in advance if we have PowerPoint. Oh, look, we already have an issue. How do I make the box
So just scroll down. Let's see.
I am scrolling
Click
down.
it once.
Click.
Oh, well, I guess you can click next now, but let's see, click it and then now just scroll once. Oops.
So this is a little bit about our program, and just in case anyone ever needs to do a referral or you have an interest in these practice areas, we do primarily civil legal services, name changes, public benefits appeals, a variety of employment matters and discrimination matters, and criminal record sealing and expungement. So our services aren't bound by cases surrounding gender. The idea behind the program is to make an affirming legal services space because of the high rate of reports of discrimination for trans and gender expansive people in legal aid and legal services areas. So for folks who've never needed a legal name change or have thought about changing their name, I just wanted to highlight all of the different ways that we use our legal names day to day, like all of the things that you would either have to say your legal name out loud to do, or you have to show an ID to gain access to. And as you can see, it's really a variety of things from our most basic human needs like housing, employment, education, to things like going out with friends, traveling, voting right now is a huge one, right? Because we're about to be, or we're currently in a primary, and you don't have to show an ID in Illinois to vote, but you do have to say your name out loud. And so for folks who have a name that doesn't align with who they are, all of like not having a name change becomes a barrier to accessing all of these things, from healthcare to buying Sudafed, where you have to show an ID to get your Sudafed purchase, even to getting into concerts if it's an age-restricted event. And this slide has some of the data from the 2015 US Transgender Survey. The organization that does that, the National Center for Trans Equality, is doing another survey right now. I imagine they will have a lot more respondents than they did in 2015. So these percentages will probably go up quite a bit. But this shows you what people experience when they don't have IDs that are congruent with who they are. So 32% of respondents experienced harassment, were denied access to services, or were assaulted from showing an ID that didn't match who they are. And I can tell you clients' experiences, we've had job denials, we've heard about being turned away at the grocery store because they used a credit card and an ID that the clerk assumed was a fake, like homemade ID with someone else's name that was also on the credit card. 16% were denied access to employment and housing and public benefits, and 9% were asked to leave a location or establishment, which is something I hear about from clients a lot. When they maybe have to show an ID to get into a bar, they're not even permitted to go in and spend time with their friends. They're just asked to leave because, again, it's perceived that their ID is fake for some reason, that they're committing fraud. We're gonna switch. Toya is gonna tell you about how to change your name legally in Illinois.
Okay, so the process to change a name starts with making sure the petitioner qualifies for it. So for Illinois, that means that they have to be a resident for the 6 months preceding filing the petition. They have to currently reside in the petition or in the county that they're filing in. They have to be 18 years or older. Illinois is one of the strictest states when it comes to criminal convictions. So Illinois has a 10-year waiting period for all felonies. Starting on the day of termination of sentence. And they also have permanent bans for sex offenses, misdemeanors, or felonies that require registry for the sex offender list, any type of charge that requires registry on the arson list, and then also any type of identity theft. The identity theft or the aggravated identity theft is a permanent ban. So the petition is a 2-page document. This is the front page of it. The first half is just getting like demographics, seeing what their name previously was and what they want to change it to. And the last 6 questions all deal with criminal histories. So question 10 and 11 both are about identity theft and sex offender registry. If you have to check, I have been convicted of that, it's an automatic ban. The other questions ask about charges and convictions for either felonies or misdemeanors in any state, including Illinois. Depending on the answers for this question, the petitioner may have to fill out chart 13, which just describes the types of convictions or probations they've been placed on. And then Illinois is a state that does require verification of a witness on the petition itself. There we go. So the actual steps for filing it. So there's 2 ways to file the petition. You can either e-file it on Odyssey, Illinois, or you can go down to the Daily Center and file it in person with the clerk. As of right now, Illinois requires a publication notice. So the automatic type of notice is with the Daily Law Bulletin. They have an office in the Daily Center that petitioners can go down on the same day they file it and get it published. Or there are other newspapers that can publish the notice for the petitioner. Each newspaper varies in cost. So if the petitioner is price conscious or using a waiver, it may be wise to shop around for different newspapers depending on the county. After everything is filed, their Zoom hearings, or the hearings are currently in Zoom for COVID, but it seems like that might be sticking around for a little bit longer. Hearing dates are also pushed back. Previously, I think it was maybe 7 to 8 weeks. Right now, it's 12 to 16 weeks before the hearing is scheduled. And the petitioner gets sent all of the Zoom information by the clerk, and it's just like the password login. They just kind of wait for their turn. And then if the petitioner does have any type of felony record, it's recommended that they bring a certified disposition of criminal conviction or file it, since they're now Zoom hearings. Yeah, and so after, assuming the hearing goes well and the judge grants the petition, they are given a court order. The certified court orders can be picked up at the Daily Center, and then those orders are used to change over the petitioner's documents. A lot of the different identification document organizations can take them by mail. Some of them you don't have to give them a copy, which helps with printing fees. It's currently $8 for each, $6 for the copy, $2 for printing. And then you can use the orders to change over most of the documents that the petitioner would have with their old name. So Illinois' filing fee is $388. That's for in-person filing. If the petitioner wanted to e-file it, there's also $11 charge, so it ends up being just under $400. Publication fees vary a lot. It's between about $90 and $200, depending which one you go to. Some choose to do it by publication type, and then others do it by line, so it kind of helps to shop around. And then the certified judgments are actually $8 currently. I think the prices have changed a little bit. If a petitioner cannot afford this fee, they can apply for a fee waiver. It's recommended that they apply when they file the petition. If they are receiving any type of like public benefits, then they kind of like automatically get a fee waiver. Or if they are 125% less than the federal poverty line, or if it caused like a severe burden on them to pay the fees. This is more so statistically instruction page. There's a lot of information, but the most important thing would be on the left side of it, where it talks about what happens if my application is granted. So that a petitioner could have 100% of the fees waived, but they could also be put on some type of discounted rate. So anywhere between like 25, 50%, or 75% can be discounted. It kind of just depends on how well they plead their case when they fill out this form and have their hearing. So if you see question 3, it's just asking about public benefits. If they check yes to this, they can skip this entire section and just go to the next page and file it. If, however, they are not receiving public benefits, they have to go through the petition and kind of detail like their expenses and all the people that they're supporting, and then have a hearing and have a judge decide what type of discount, if any, they will be receiving on the fees. The other alternative is that if they work with an organization that has a type of like nonprofit pro bono program, then the program themselves can fill out an application on their behalf and kind of certify that the person has an income level of 125% or less, and then all of the fees are waived. And then the order, so this is talking about the certified documents, and it's all the things that the person can use to change over all of their documents.
And I just want to add on to what Toya said. If you're changing a name in Cook County, there's 6 districts in Cook County. They can all be filed in Chicago. You don't have to file it in the suburban courthouse. And I recommend that. There's so few name changes filed in the suburbs that a lot of times they just don't get processed properly by the clerk, or the judge kind of hasn't done one before. It's really, really slow. And also this is for adult name changes only. If you will have our contact info up, if you have questions about minor name changes, there are a lot of differences. I'm happy to walk you through that, or do a call if that comes up for you in practice. Also in Chicago, the judges require a birth certificate, proof of residency, which usually you can use like a driver's license or state ID. If they have an out-of-state driver's license or state ID, then you have to provide like a utility bill, something showing they live here. I've never experienced that in any other county or in any other part of Cook County. It's just the judges in Chicago. Some of the judges will let you attest to your client being who they are. If they are unhoused and maybe you don't have access to documents. Some are really strict and will just issue continuances until you have all of the proof of identity. It's not in the statute, it's just an additional requirement, and the judges have not been willing to drop that requirement. In lots of conversations about that, and that I don't think is going away anytime soon. So it's just sort of a quirk that you wouldn't know from reading the law. You would get, I see a lot of pro se litigants get to court and they followed all of the steps, but they didn't file those pieces of documentation and have to, wait for their hearing. After already waiting, like Toya said, like 12 to 16 weeks after filing the petition, they have to wait even longer. So now I want to talk about House Bill 2542 and put our name change law into context of what we're working with. So it is Pride Month, and I think we've all heard about what's been happening in the United States over the last couple of months. 240 anti-LGBT bills have been filed nationwide just this year alone. A lot of them targeting trans people and trans youth. And I hear a lot in Illinois, like, oh, we're so lucky to live here. We don't have any of that going on, but we have the second most conservative name change law in the United States, which disproportionately affects trans and gender expansive people for 2 reasons. One, our restrictions are related to criminal records, and trans people are disproportionately incarcerated, engaged with criminal legal systems. And 2, they're more likely to seek out name changes. So for the last couple of years, Coalition, Chicago House, ACLU of Illinois, Chicago Bar Foundation, and the Transformative Justice Law Project, we've been trying to get our law changed. So the three big restrictions in our law, one is the 10-year waiting period. So that is 10 years after the last date of your most recent sentence. You cannot file for a name change until that 10-year period is up for felonies. Misdemeanors, fine. Pending charges, fine. Open warrant, fine. Your client will probably get picked up because now you're telling the court exactly where that person is if they have an open warrant. You don't have to be a citizen to file, but you cannot have had a felony conviction in less than 10 years from the filing date. Only 15 states have any kind of ban or waiting period related to felonies. Identity theft ban is lifetime. Only 2 states in the United States have this kind of ban. And then we have a ban. So we want to remove the 10-year waiting period. We want to remove that identity theft ban. And then we also have a lifetime ban for anyone on a criminal registry, which is sex offense, arson, and murder and violence against youth registries. So in talks with law enforcement, what we sort of came up with is a judicial discretion standard. So if the law passes, you all saw the front page of that petition where people have to check boxes. Yes, I have to register. And then we would add boxes saying, but I am changing my name for reasons of religion, marriage, survivors of human trafficking who disproportionately end up on the sex offender registry due to actions they're coerced into by their trafficker, or gender identity related reasons. And what that would do is get the person in front of a judge, and the judge would be able to look at the totality of the case, and the person can make their case. The state's attorney's office also gets notice that the name change is happening. They can come and object if they want, and the judge can make a decision. Right now, if someone who is on a registry files a petition for a name change, they can be charged with a class 3 or 4 felony, which most folks don't know. Most people aren't sitting and reading the name change statute. They don't know that even filing the paperwork can get them another felony. So it's not a perfect method, but this would at least give people a shot at possibly being able to get their name changed if they fall into these categories. It is still a very conservative measure. Only 21 states have any mention of registries in their name change laws. And only 11 have bans. So if this was really a safety risk, I think we would see a lot more states having laws like ours. But when you get a name change, you don't get new fingerprints. You don't get a new social security number. And so in this age of technology, it's very easy to keep track of folks. And if our law passes, people would be required to update their registration, just like when they move. We have very conservative registration acts in Illinois too. So even if you get a new Twitter handle, you have to update your registration. So similar to those, you would have to update your registration. In the current law, if you have any criminal record, old felonies, misdemeanors, anything, when you get your name changed, the order automatically goes to Illinois State Police. Your criminal history gets updated. That's staying in the law. That would also happen with registrants. So the registrant would go and update the registry, but Illinois State Police also gets flagged. Everybody knows what's going on. Folks already go by aliases. So this would help people move more safely for themselves throughout the world, throughout spaces, and perhaps maybe we wouldn't have as many aliases as well. And then we also have some procedural changes. So right now, under the current law, the state's attorney's office can file an objection. They get a copy of every name change petition. So even, there's an error on a birth certificate and you're changing the name of your 11-month-old child. They get that petition to do a background check, and they can file an objection if something comes up for them. I have been doing name changes in Illinois for a long time, since 2011, so 11 years. This provision went in 2018. I've never experienced an objection from the state's attorney's office. And since 2018, I've done somewhere between 200 and 250 name changes. So we want to narrow that down because they had to create new positions when that law went into effect. There was a pause on name changes to get caught up, and they had to hire someone to review all these petitions. So to make it more efficient and more cost effective, our amendment to the law is that it would only the petitions for people with pending charges, identity theft convictions, or registration conviction, their petitions would go to the state's attorney's office. And there would be a box on the form, they check it off, and that would then like flag to the clerk that this needs to be sent to the state's attorney's office. Right now, the current law doesn't require notice. So if a state's attorney wants to object to a name change, they just show up the date of the hearing. The petitioner has not been able to prepare. They don't know to bring a lawyer if they're pro se. That is very out of step with the other, like all civil procedure in Illinois. So we included a notice requirement. We want to eliminate the third-party witness requirement. Only a handful of states have that, and it became an issue for people during COVID who otherwise, like pro se folks could have filed, but maybe they lived alone. They didn't have anyone to file, like to sign the witness requirement. We noticed some judges in Chicago starting to require someone who knows the person very well, which like is very hard to prove. Like they wouldn't allow attorneys to sign. It's like this unnecessary burden because you're already signing under penalty of perjury when you sign your petition. And then in the hearing, you're sworn in under oath. So there's no reason to have this witness requirement. And right now, publication is part of why it's taking 12 to 16 weeks for hearings to be scheduled, because the publication has to happen 3 consecutive weeks, and your hearing can't happen until after that happens, and it has to be 6 weeks before your hearing to give people time to, I guess, read the paper and find out you're changing your name. So, and you can get it waived, but the way the law is written right now, the waivers really only tend to be granted to people who have like orders of protection or police report for stalking or domestic violence and can show that it would be a safety risk for them. If people, we've tried presenting statistics on discrimination, people being worried about being outed and told we have to prove that the discrimination will happen, which is not actually possible. So we want to expand that waiver, and people will be able to indicate that it would be a hardship. They would go in front of the judge and argue what the hardship is. And if the waiver is not granted, it's just you get a continuance and you go and publish and you come back. And if it is granted, you would get your name changed that day. And then the forms that you saw are the Illinois Supreme Court forms, and it would become a requirement that those are the only forms folks can use, because some counties have different forms. No one knows what to use. We just want to make it simple, have one petition, one set of forms that is available to everybody, so that the judges also get used to reading the same set of forms. There used to be on the old forms an ability for couples to change their names together and only pay one fee. We would add that back in because right now it's very confusing as to like, it was taken off and no one knows how to do it for couples. So we would add that back in and everyone would be using the same form. So we included a couple of stories. I could, tell you 1,000 more of these. We get calls all the time from folks who have stories like Crystal, who is a woman who was going to school for a while, and teachers were trying, but her legal name is on all of her paperwork. So sometimes like first day of class, they don't even know who's who, but they were having a really hard time calling her by the name that she goes by, and she was being outed by in class and harassed by other students. So she dropped out of school, and she's been working like job hopping because she keeps getting outed at jobs. And this one particular job, I think it mentions it in the story. Yes, so someone at her job outed her and told security. And so security started trailing her every time she went to the bathroom. Because the name on her ID then correlated with the name on the punching clock. And the person that she worked with saw her name on the punching clock and said, this person should be using the women's bathroom. She really wants to change careers, but she feels like she can't progress in any direction because of her name. she feels like she can't go out with people because she's worried. And we have an epidemic in the United States of Black and brown trans women being murdered. And she's very, rightly so, very concerned about being publicly outed at a bar or a club and then someone following her home and harming her. And the mental strain of this is really intense. Like, I've talked to her many times about this, and it's just the mental health impact. I can't stress to you how severe it is for her and for so many other people. And then another woman who I'm in pretty steady contact with is Alyssa. Alyssa is an entrepreneur. She's opening a business in Chicago, and she has investor meetings pretty regularly. Like, this business is going to go, it's probably gonna, it sounds like it'll be pretty successful. It's in a market people are interested in investing in. But in her investor meetings, her legal name comes up because it's on paperwork. And she's been accused of fraud. She has to out herself in every meeting, and it's really uncomfortable. And it takes the focus away from the work that she's doing and who she is and what she's done and what she's going to do. And she's really excited to open her business, but she doesn't want to have her legal name on all, like, she wants this to be in the name of who she is. And, you know, she's going to be contributing significantly to our city and to our state, but the state won't let her change her name. And it's also causing her a lot of stress, especially in these meetings, these big business meetings where there's just like one more hurdle. It's hard enough to pitch a business, and then you have to add that to it. And it's just incredibly stressful. And we hear these stories all the time. I talked to someone a few weeks ago who called because she can't get a job because of the name on her application, and was worried about losing her housing because she said, I can't even, like, I'm applying at convenience stores and I can't get hired. Like, I can't get hired, it feels like, anywhere. I worked with someone a few years ago who worked at a retail store, and when the receipt would print out when she was ringing someone out, the name that the store registered her, like with her employee profile, would come up on the receipt, which was her legal name. And it was a name that is traditionally male, which would out her then to customers. And this was in a more conservative part of the state. Not that this can't happen anywhere in Illinois, it certainly can. And she was getting harassed and bullied. It's not a requirement to put someone's legal name, by the way, on a receipt in a system. It's just needs to go on their W-2. Time clocks, name tags, receipts can all have a name the person goes by. I think, people go cisgender, people who are not transgender go by their middle names or nicknames all the time. And I don't see employers push back on that, but I do see them push back when a trans person wants to go by the name that aligns with who they are, but it's not their legal name. So these are all of the problems our current law is creating. As you can see, there's a lot of organizations who support changing the current law, and there's, Chicago Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation and the Network and other organizations that work with survivors of sexual violence are in support. Even though we're changing registry provisions, we have no formal opposition to this bill. So if this is something that you feel you want to support, this is how you can support it. It's been in the Senate. It passed out of the House with 85, it's strong bipartisan support to have 85 yes votes. We just need to get it out of the Senate. The next opportunity will be in the fall. So we need folks to call their senators and ask them to support it. It's really crucial that we get this law changed so that more people can have access to name changes. Lots of people change their name, not just trans and gender expansive people, but obviously the impact is more significant on that community that's already facing other kinds of barriers. And so we want to make everyone in Illinois safer and have more access to the resources they need so that they can move forward and thrive. And we're hoping we can get those amendments passed and have a busy January of doing a lot of name changes. So that is the presentation, and we're going to do a Q&A. We already had a question come in, I think, through the sign-up form. So someone asked about respectful introductions in small meetings. I think the gist of the question is how to set up when you're in a meeting and you're asking people to go around and introduce themselves. And I would say in every meeting, name and pronoun is great. So the person leading the meeting would start with their name and their pronouns and just ask folks to share if they're comfortable. And some people don't use pronouns. They prefer just to use their name. Some people might not want to share that. So I would leave it open to the group. But I think it's particularly important. I've worked with employers who say like, well, I don't think we have any transgender people here. So why would we talk about pronouns? Everyone uses pronouns. I think the best example I can think of is if a sort of like very masculine cisgender man, like they don't generally like being referred to with female pronouns. So when people say to me like, I don't use who are these pronoun people? Like, I don't have pronouns. Everybody uses pronouns except folks who prefer to use their name. So, and everyone has a gender. I heard another trainer refer to gender as a constellation. And I think it's a beautiful way of thinking about it. So we sort of need to move away from sort of male, female, binary genders, and then everyone else. There's a beautiful galaxy of genders out there. And so I think regardless if someone is cisgender or trans or non-binary, if you're leading a meeting, lead with your name and your pronouns. And ask other people to do so as well. I think also having them in your email signature is a great way to be inclusive and affirming. So I hope if you're here in the room or you're on Zoom, I hope that answered the question. And we can open it up to other questions. Oh my goodness, I'll start here and we'll work our way across.
What is the purpose of publication?
That's a great question. So originally it was meant so that if someone owed you a debt, you could read the newspaper and see someone was changing their name and I suppose confront them. But debt is more now tied to through creditors and social security numbers. We've been told that banks read the paper and look for people's name changes. I can't confirm that that's accurate. So it's a very outdated requirement, but it is an income generator for print publications. There's other processes that also require publication notices. In an ideal world, all of that would be eliminated, and states are eliminating them. And we hope that someday we will be able to eliminate ours because they just aren't serving anyone. There isn't really a purpose. Child support was another thing that people were used to say like, oh, you can read the paper and see if someone who owes you child support is changing their name. But again, all of that is tied through other identifiers. So because people who owe a debt or child support can get married and use a marriage certificate to change their last name, and they don't have to publish a notice of that. So, and sometimes a last name can be an even more unique signifier than a first name. So I think it's mostly right now just a profit generating mechanism. Yes.
Toya mentioned something about like if your hearing is successful, there are already all these like bars in place. What, like if you get to that point, what like would they be denied for? Because I just feel like those bars, well, one should be gone because like whose business is it is, what your name is, but like what happens at that point?
Usually either someone comes and doesn't have a birth certificate, doesn't have an ID, didn't publish properly. So it's more of a continuance issue. If they didn't know about the felony ban, like pro se litigants, because it doesn't say anywhere in the form, stop. If you have a felony that's less than 10 years old, or you have to register, you can't file this petition. There are notes, the forms, Access Justice and Illinois Legal Aid Online have in the instructions, but I mean, all either lawyers or law students, and I think we all know a lot of times we're not reading, like we don't even read the fine print on things. So I have had one-off situations, like I had someone who had a misdemeanor conviction. It wasn't related to identity theft or registry. It was just like retail theft or something. But the form asks, do you have any misdemeanor convictions? And the client did, but we didn't have any sort of disposition sheet or anything for it because it's not in the ban, and the judge denied the name change until we would come back and have a disposition sheet. I mean, sort of judge's whims. Also, if the state's attorney files an objection, shows up and they successfully argue why it would be, you know, a public safety hazard for this person to change their name, even if they don't, it's not statutorily required to deny them, that could potentially happen, I suppose. Thankfully, I've never heard of that happening, but.
What do you suggest for like clients who are turning 18 soon but want to have a name change? You know, like, so even in instances where like their parents are like comfortable with them changing their name and they like agree and are supportive.
I mean, if both parents are around, like involved and agree, it's a lot faster to change your name when you're under 18. So if only one parent's in agreement, you have to serve notice on the other parent. The other parent is given an opportunity to come to a hearing and object. If both parents are involved, they can do one files and there's a box for the second parent to say, yes, I agree. You file the paperwork and you usually can get the hearing and the name change done that week. So if someone's under 18 and can get it in before they become an adult and parents are on board, I 100%, that's so much faster. It's so much less expensive. It's a more straightforward and easy process. I think, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Okay.
I was wondering, is it an easier process if you change your name again?
Like if you've already had a legal name change, yeah, you just have to make sure that you'll have to file a copy of the name change order from the original name change to explain why the name on your birth certificate isn't the name you're putting on the petition. So you just have to show that. Again, also if you were married and used your marriage certificate to change your name on your ID and all of your documentation. So you're Jane Smith, you get married and your name changes to Jane Doe, and now you want to change it to John Doe, you would need to file a birth certificate and a marriage certificate to show, sort of follow the path of where your name has gone to show that they're all still you.
But it won't be as many as like the publication and the extra things.
Oh no, you have to do everything.
Okay.
It's the same like each time. It's just each time you have to file an extra piece because you just have to show the process, like the progress of your name. Because everything kind of goes back to that birth certificate and driver's license. And even I think in courts where they don't require birth certificates, when you're going to change your documents with different bureaus, they might have questions. And so it's just easier to file all of it and have it all in one place. Yes.
What do the steps after getting your name change order from the judge look like? How can trans clients get everything else changed with that?
So that depends on the document. Unfortunately, it's all different offices. I had worked with a client who's from Denmark and he was able to just email the government and everything got changed. Like all in. And he's like, what is happening? And it's like, we're not Denmark in so many ways. So the ones in Illinois are Illinois birth certificate. You just fill out a form and mail it in with a $15 check and a copy of the name change order. DMV, technically you're supposed to change your driver's license or state ID within 10 days. During COVID, obviously that was like, at times it was impossible because the DMV was closed, but you just show up to the counter, name change order. We usually recommend if someone wants to change their gender marker as well to do it all at the same time. So for birth certificate gender marker, you still have to have a doctor's note, which is so outdated and ludicrous that a doctor knows who someone is more than they do. Ask your senators to support HB9, which is a bill that would remove that requirement. And then for driver's license, thankfully, we've gotten rid of the doctor's note requirement. There's just a form someone fills out. Passport, Social Security are all separate, and Social Security, you have to go, usually it's fastest if you go to an office with your order. Social Security automatically updates your IRS like file. if you're not born in Illinois, every state has a different procedure. Some require more or less documentation. For gender markers, in some states, they require a judicial order confirming that you have transitioned. We do not in Illinois, and so we have no mechanism in Illinois to get a court order for someone who's like, if they're born in Missouri, it's a state that requires this. We don't have any way, like judges here won't issue that kind of order because we don't have any statute granting them the purview to do that, even though you can ask for all kinds of things in motions that aren't necessarily in a statute. So generally those folks will have to find a lawyer in that state where they were born to go to court and get a court order from a judge there. It is a huge barrier for people that we haven't solved yet. We're working on it because like Indiana has that requirement, Maryland, Missouri, some states out west do too, and then lots of other states like us don't have any sort of provision, and so it creates this really unpleasant patchwork of things. Credit cards and bank accounts the bank doesn't usually keep the name change order, you just have to show it. Some credit card companies, you just call and say you changed their name and they just change it. Like you don't have to even fax over a name change order. So it's a lot of phone calls and filling out forms, but you know, it's just, you just got to take a couple days and knock it out usually.
I know we've gotten some questions over Zoom too.
Oh, great.
So Abby, do you want to unmute and ask a question from the Zoom chat?
Sure. Yeah, we have actually lots of questions in the chat, but I'll start with this one because it goes back to the beginning of the presentation a bit. But could you discuss a little bit about what the hearing usually looks like and how do you advise your clients ahead of the hearing?
Sure. So the best piece of advice I can give the clients is that it will be fast. I think something we hear a lot is their confusion over how it doesn't look like TV, especially now that it's on Zoom. So prep them by telling them, you know, you may be in the Zoom waiting room for a little while, or you may be all let in together and you'll see lots of strangers' faces in the boxes. The judge, depending on the judge you get, will either read the petition question by question, which I think it's really important to prep clients for that because sometimes it can feel like the judge is only asking them about criminal background. Those judges, that's just how they run their courtroom. They read every question on the petition and the client has to answer them all over again. Some judges just look at the petition, ask, are you this person? Great, and they stamp the order. Unless there is some sort of extenuating circumstance, like there's a typo that they have a question about or things weren't submitted properly, it takes usually less than 3 minutes and then it's over, which is, I found the most jarring thing for clients. And I try to prep them that it's not an adversarial experience because I think most folks from watching TV and movies think it will be like that they're on trial or they're going to be interrogated, and everything is really done with the paperwork. This is just a formality.
I'll go to the next question. Can you discuss the sealing of the name change petitions? Any issues with doing this and experiences with judges?
Did you say sealing of a petition?
Correct.
I have not ever done a sealing of a petition. I don't know. I think it would have to be very extenuating circumstances for that to be granted. I know other attorneys who have tried because folks are worrying about being outed, and they have not been successful, at least in First District in Chicago. Okay. Was that it for the Zoom?
I've got a couple more. I don't want to monopolize if there are some in the room, so maybe I'll do one last one. We can go back to the room. So this question is, can the name change order be used to change the birth certificate to the new name?
Yes, it has to be used. I think in almost every state. I don't know of any states that don't require it.
What do you do if you don't have a birth certificate?
Do you want to answer that one? Take it. Okay. If you just don't have a copy of it.
You don't have a copy, you're from a different country, I don't know, you just don't have a birth certificate.
So if you don't have a copy, you would just go to the vital records of the state that you were born in and request a copy, and probably need a continuance for your hearing. We try to encourage people to get their birth certificates and then file, so that they don't get excited for the hearing date and then have to wait. If you were born somewhere, I had this happen with a client who was born in Uganda and was here under refugee status, and we couldn't get a copy. So what I did was tried in writing. So I emailed the consulate, I emailed the records office in Uganda multiple times. I tweeted at them, like I did everything possibly could. And then I printed it all out. And then I wrote an affidavit that I then had notarized saying, here are all the steps that we took to try and get the birth certificate. It is impossible. I actually happened to be in DC for something else. So I went to the embassy office in DC and sat there and tried to get a copy of it. And I had documentation that I had gone there, like, and just, it's literally impossible. This person's here under refugee status. The government's being hostile. We just can't produce it. And that was, the judge felt that was enough to show, because it's not, and then you can also, if you're advocating for a client, a judge might not like it, but you can also raise that it's not in the statute. There's no requirement that someone present a birth certificate to get a name change in Illinois. That is a local rule. And it shouldn't be a barrier for someone, because if they don't have one, there's usually a reason. And it's just like an affidavit and paper trail of we tried, like an affidavit of due diligence. Any more in the room questions? Are there more Zoom questions?
Yeah, I think we have a question on basically cultural competency. Like, how would you, like, what tips would you give to attorneys working with trans clients?
Oh boy, that's like a whole separate. I do have a CLE on that. I'm trying to figure out how to like nutshell that. I would say just be aware of anything. I mean, it's so strange in COVID because a lot of my tips have in mind, like I'm contemplating in-person meetings. So think about the bathrooms in your firm, like on the floors of your firm. Think about if they have to show an ID to get up to your office, and like ask when you're booking the consultation, do you feel comfortable showing an ID? And if not, try to like meet them and walk them up, talk to security if you can, and try to get around the ID requirement. Make sure that you're, seeing clients in spaces where bathroom use will be comfortable and safe. Always ask if they haven't had a legal name change, what name you should use with whom. So what name do you want me to use with opposing counsel? If you're doing a case where you're going to be speaking to witnesses on their behalf, like what name do you want me to use with the witnesses? What name do you want on, any pleadings? If someone hasn't had a legal name change, we just do both. If the client wants the name they go by to be on the pleading, we just do an AKA. And the same thing for pronouns. What pronouns should I use? What pronouns do you want me to use in court? Because that can really vary for people in terms of the context of where and how they feel the most safe. If there is an issue with the judge or opposing counsel, mostly this is a technique for opposing counsel, being aggressive and using incorrect pronouns on purpose. You can use what we call a gender motion, asking the court to order anyone involved with the case to use the correct pronouns for your client. And just like check in to see what makes people the most comfortable. Do you have ideas to add to any of that?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think language and honoring the client's identity is probably the most helpful advice.
Yeah. I would say if anyone tells you that they, them pronouns can't be used because it's not correct grammar, they're wrong, and don't listen to them. Like, use the pronouns your client uses, period. Like, don't raise some sort of strange grammatical argument. clients' comfort and safety is number one. Because most legal processes are uncomfortable already. Like aside from name changes and maybe like adoptions or starting an LLC, most of the things people are talking to lawyers about means that some sort of stressor, even, and sometimes it can even be the happy stressor if I'm starting a business, but it's still stressful. You don't want to compound that by not respecting the client and not making sure that you're doing everything you can to at least make interacting with you feel safe and affirming. I think beyond that, also, we just need to make law schools more affirming and more accessible for folks so that we can have more trans and gender expansive attorneys working in the field. It's changed a lot since I was in law school, but and now there's a trans bar association, which is really exciting. But I think there's a lot that needs to be done to make the profession more supportive so that we can have more practitioners in every area of law. And so that clients can also see representation of themselves in who they're hiring.
What are some ways law students and attorneys can help volunteer to help change trans people's names?
So we generally don't take volunteers. We do offer internships. So we do summer, we've been very lucky to get funding the past 4 summers for summer intern through LAGBAC. And we do internships if it's for class credit for fall, spring semesters. The Transformative Justice Law Project, which is another trans-focused group that does name changes, they do take volunteers. As Toya mentioned, everything's been on Zoom. I don't think things are going back to in-person in Chicago for name changes, including filing generally, unless you can prove that you can't e-file, it has to be e-filed. So I'm not sure how the model for volunteering there works. When I was a volunteer there, we literally just sat at the Daily Center one Friday every month from 9 to 5, and people will come up to a desk. But they do have the structure in place to take volunteers.
There were a couple more questions in the chat if there's no one in the room. Sorry, I'm scrolling back to it. So one question is, it says, I realize that expanding access to name changes eliminates many of the stories that you discussed, but have any of the people you mentioned have success under anti-discrimination laws?
Can that person say more about that?
I will let you know when they follow up. There was another question that asks, says, I know that a lot of trans people have historically been criminalized for sex work. Is that a bar or is there a way around that?
So in Illinois, it is still a bar. We had felony prostitution, and that was eliminated in 2014, I believe. So there are some people who are still waiting their 10 years. Now it's moved to misdemeanor, so it doesn't create that bar, but there are people who are still waiting out their 10-year waiting period from when we had that here.
So the person that asked the other question clarified, they said, when you mentioned the story of the store clerk or the person harassed in the bathroom at work.
So the store clerk, yes, that did end up being a case that I wrapped up for that person. My predecessor, they'd settled, but they did try to my predecessor tried to negotiate with the employer and ended up going into a settlement. The other woman did not want to pursue anything because of all the reasons why someone wouldn't want to pursue suing their employer. It's stressful, it's traumatic. Even though it is illegal to fire an employee for complaining or filing a discrimination charge against you, they will usually find some sort of pretextual reason because employers don't like getting sued. So she wasn't interested in pursuing anything against that. She just really wants the law to change.
Any final questions? in the room over Zoom or anything? Okay, well then,
If there's our contact information. So, Toya's email address got cut off, but it's tcrow@Chicago House. If anyone has questions about what we presented on or, anything else, I'm always happy to chat and help out.
wonderful. Well, thank you to Elizabeth and Toya for this wonderful presentation. And then we will be back next week with another educational seminar. It's our public interest in the career path. So we'll have 3 attorneys talking about their career path in either government or legal aid. So encourage you to come, encourage you to submit questions beforehand. And we'll make sure that we get them talking about what you want to hear about. Also a plug for Pilly's YouTube channel. We've posted some of the educational seminars up. So if you missed one of the sessions, you can look there. We also have a bunch of CLEs on our website from past sessions and past seminars that we provided CLE credit for volunteers or for interns, fellows, anyone who's listening now, check out Pilly's website for all that. And then